In this video, we're taking a look at all the techniques you're going to need to know in order to win your first fight. Now, you see here, this is my student Robbie. This is Rad Robbie. Absolutely crushed his first fight, didn't even get touched. And this is the curriculum that we practiced. We really focused on these things. With so many martial arts being mixed into the sport of mixed martial arts, it can be confusing as to which moves you should be doing. But I've got a really special guest here in order to help me narrow in on what moves really are the fundamentals of this sport as a style in its own. We've got the legendary Kirik Jenness, my MMA coach, and a man who's done everything in mixed martial arts except for Ring Card Girl. He's the recipient of the 2022 World MMA Awards Lifetime Achievement Award.
Appreciation for someone whose body of work truly is an achievement of a lifetime.
Hey, Kirik, congratulations on your Lifetime Achievement Award. And, you know, I've been thinking back since I found out you were getting this award and thinking about the underground in the early days. It was a forum where Joe Rogan, me, all the fighters, and many, many other people, when the sport was very niche and very small, and all the fans could come, and you could talk about mixed martial arts, and you could talk about martial arts, and it was just such a cool thing at the time before Twitter, Instagram, or any of these other big social media platforms popped up.
He became only the 10th person to have won the award when he received it, and other people that have won the award include Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, John McCarthy, Bruce Buffer, and others who have played a significant role in this sport that we all love. He opened the first MMA gym in Massachusetts. He wrote the first book on mixed martial arts. He's the official record keeper for MMA, as called for by the Muhammad Ali Act, a U.S. federal law. He oversees all the rankings for UFC, Bellator, and BKFC. He runs mixedmartialarts.com. It is no exaggeration that mixedmartialarts.com is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, websites in the history of the sport. He co-wrote with Kip Kolar the rules for NAGA, the world's largest grappling organization. He's officiated thousands of matches and did the first MMA judge and referee officials training for Massachusetts and New Hampshire when the sport was first legalized in New England. He's an expert television commentator for MMA, and he's currently one of the commentators for the MMA organization Brave. He's cornered hundreds of fights, from first-time amateurs to multiple-time UFCs, and he's even appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience. You can check him out in episode 675. Kirik has been studying the sport forever. He's been around since the Genesis, and he is one who would really know what moves you need to know in order to have your first fight be successful. So let's talk with Kirik. This is the base concept, right? Stance. Stance is the foundation of the whole thing. And even if you're a wrestler, you gotta know the stance. Every move that you throw theoretically comes from here and returns to it when it's done if you're in the open space. What do you think, Eric? Just another picture on stage.
Couldn't agree more. Folk style wrestling, the form of wrestling practiced in America many decades ago now, made an attempt at formalizing all the moves, and they tried to reduce it to, they tried to define the fundamental moves that everybody could agree with. And they ended up, because folk style is so complex, just with 5 of them. First one, of course, is stance, then movement, then back step, level change, and penetration step. Boom.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. And obviously, stance is first. Doesn't really matter what martial art you're learning. Okinawan karate, boxing, MMA, grappling, wrestling. You're always going to learn stance first.
It has to be. You can't skip it. You can't skip it. I know it, a lot of people may want to skip it when they first start, but you got to understand this 100%.
One problem with teaching stance is people think it's simple, and they see it and they're like, okay, let's do something fun, like a Superman punch or something. But although it looks simple, it takes years to get down. 100%. And if you look at a world-class boxer, that takes a decade to be able to move with complete fluidity. And at the same time, your body is completely rock solid and can explode. It literally takes a decade. So anybody starting off, even though stance looks like as simple as counting 1, 2, 3, it's not.
Yes. Take the hour on your first class to learn this first. Don't go chasing that Superman punch on your first day. Like, do this, and that Superman punch will be a million times easier. Unbelievably so.
Amen.
Okay, footwork. I define this as the way the stance travels around in the space you're in. Right? The footwork is going to allow you to move that stance to different positions. And you don't, it's their first fight. They don't have to get crazy with the footwork, but they got to get down forward step, backward step, left and right. And they got to be really, really comfortable with that. What do you think?
I agree wholly. The Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule absolutely applies here. I break footwork in MMA down into the step drag and then little bouncing and then big bounce steps kind of thing. But the latter two are less than 20% of it. The step drag is the dominant form of movement in mixed martial arts, as it is in boxing, particularly as it's practiced in boxing in the West. And that's what you should focus on, is that step drag.
The step drag, one of the things I think makes it important is the feet travel equal distances, right? So when you're done with a footwork technique, you should be back in your stance. Like, ideally, it would be exactly the same over here as when you stepped forward. What are your thoughts on that?
100% true. And typically when people are moving forward and back, they end up with their feet too close together. And when they start trying to move laterally, they end up too squared up. So exactly what you said is super important for people to keep in mind. Your stance should be identical every single time.
100%. And you know what? It's probably going to be your best form of defense. If it's your first fight, odds are you might not be able to pull off head movement, but you'll be able to back away. And if you got your footwork down, that takes a lot. That takes care, like, that covers a good amount of defense. There's subtleties to that. You can learn that on nights. I'm sure I'll put a commercial in for that at some point in this video. And here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game. But at least that drag forward drag step there, and then what that teaches, how it transports your stance. Okay, the double leg. I'm going to make a statement here. I want to see if you agree with it. Is this the most important move? Is this the best move? If you get this down, are you going to win?
The locked hands double, which you're seeing an example of right there by Rashad Evans, is absolutely the most important offensive takedown in mixed martial arts. Yes. On a statistical basis, actually, the most common way to get a takedown at the elite level of mixed martial arts is actually off a caught kick. But as far as an offensive takedown, there's no question in my mind, or I think in anybody's mind, that locked hands double is where it's at.
Yeah, you know what? It could even be so that you don't necessarily need wrestling if you just master the double, right? GSP, no high school wrestling, no college wrestling, highest double leg percentage. He was just really, he had good wrestling, don't get me wrong. But that focus on the double leg as a move, no one could stop it. If they can't stop your double, they're probably going to lose, right? If they can't stop it, you're probably going to win. So the numbers are there, the percentages are there. What do you think?
One of the things that people get confused about in mixed martial arts is their experience in grappling. Rolling while you're grappling is a relatively low intensive activity. I mean, it's so low intensive, you can get high on cannabis and still roll phenomenally. So under that circumstance, knowing tons and tons and tons of moves, hundreds, thousands, actually thousands of moves is incredibly valuable. But like
Sure.
Carlson Sr. said, punch a black belt in the face, brown belt, punch him again, purple belt. So in mixed martial arts, you don't want to know thousands and thousands of moves. Those are great if your
Yes.
goal is to be really good at rolling in the gym. But if your goal is to be a fighter, you want to get incredibly good at just a handful of things. You want to get good at setting them up, you want to get good at the attack, and you want to get good at overcoming all the common counters. And you want to get so good at it, you can do it when somebody's punching you in the face. And it is literally impossible to learn, 60 different takedowns really well. If you look at judo, judo's a great example. Judo
Well,
has, I think, 20 some in their canon. It's maybe 34. God, my memory's bad. Anyways, there's a set number of judo throws that have lasted for over 100 years. Everybody agrees to them. No one competes with more than 5. Most people compete with about 3. And unfortunately, people coming to mixed martial
sure.
arts from a jiu-jitsu background tend to think that what works great to enhance your rolling, which is just knowing everything, millions of little minute moves, is going to translate well, and it doesn't. Yeah, if you want to know one takedown, absolutely positively, it should be the double leg. And if you learn 50 different takedowns and the double leg is one of them, you're not going to be nearly as good as if you
Yeah.
just learn one.
Yes, 100%. And one of the best things about the UFC is it's given us all this data on what works. We really can see what works over and over and over and over again. The science is done for us. The double leg is just the science is there. So yeah, the double leg, gotta learn the double leg. Single leg. I'd say this, I didn't usually use a single leg. I just couldn't get it. But I think if you look at the data, single leg might be like the second best move or close to the first, the best move, the double leg. Not only because there's so many options for takedowns, but you can switch into the double leg like this. It just sets it up so they're like peanut butter and jelly, those two. So I'm curious your thoughts on single leg.
Yeah, the most dominant strike in boxing is obviously a jab. Like
Yeah,
boxing just is a jab, but you have to have that right. If all you have is a left, people are just going to cover up for the left, and
yeah,
you're not going to get anything through. So in order to get a really good double, you also want to have a really good single for twin reasons. One, so you can flow back and forth between the two of them, and two, single leg's a great takedown on its own. So yeah, absolutely, knowing a single and a double is peanut butter and jelly.
yeah. And a good option is if you're fighting open stance, so you have opposite legs forward. I have my right, he has his left. It's a little bit hard to hit the double, but if that lead leg is a little closer, that single is more available. So depending on how you're squaring up with the opponent, the single or the double could be there, and a single pretty much leads to a double or a takedown all on its own. Sprawling, right? Like if the double leg is the best move, then this might be like the best defensive move, right? Like when we say sprawling, it's really just getting your hips back and not letting that double leg happen. So if you don't know this move and your opponent knows the double leg and is good at it, you have no chance, in my opinion. If you have no sprawl and he has a double leg, it's not, sorry. It's basics. What are your thoughts?
There's a slightly weird split in mixed martial arts. It is hard to learn how to do a takedown, a double leg, single leg. It's hard. It takes a lot of time. It is easy to learn how to sprawl. And with
Sure,
striking, reverse
sure.
is true. It's easy to learn how to throw a jab, how to throw a straight. Defending against those two, that's pretty hard. So the sprawl and brawl style, comes out of that simple fact. It's just the quickest thing you can get good at. It is easy to learn how to punch hard. If you're athletic, if you played
Yeah.
ice hockey, any contact sport, in 3 months, in fact, with 0 months, if you close your fist up and you smack somebody in the face, it's going to hurt. The same thing cannot be said with defense. If you do whatever instinctive thing, it's going to be wrong. 100%. Oh, you're
Yeah.
going to close
Oh,
your
yeah.
eyes. You're going
It's
to lean
not
away.
natural.
You're going to bring both your, it's all going to be
100%.
wrong. But
Yes.
the sprawl is so easy to learn compared to the takedown that it's absolutely not just a must, but really it's something you want to learn in the very, very beginning.
100%. Front headlock. And, you know, the sprawl and the front headlock, they can kind of work together. You can get it off of his shot. But I think it's very important to make a distinction between front headlock and guillotine, right? Front headlock is a control position. And one of the major advantages is it gives you the snap down. You can snap them down from that front headlock. Now, I think a lot of people, when they get front headlock, they don't know, they think they have to go guillotine. And I've seen a lot of guys, you know, guillotine, you can finish them. But I've seen a lot of guys just give up the worst positions from having this wonderful front headlock and then jumping up in the air and slamming on their back. So what do you think about a front headlock?
Yeah, front headlock is an amazing tool.
Sure.
Its versatility is staggering. You can use the front headlock to control an opponent, to move them around to where you want, to move them near your corner, to move them up near the fence. You can use it for a snap down. In folk style wrestling, the highest percent, as I said earlier, the highest percentage takedown at the elite levels of MMA is off a caught kick. Folk style wrestling, the highest percentage takedown is a snap down off of a shot. And the front headlock is just a super common way to find yourself. And it's not just a control position. With a little bit of adjustment, you can turn into an arm in guillotine too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's an absolutely, the offense and defense against it is absolutely a must-have piece of the puzzle.
I love that you mentioned that. You can 100% get a guillotine without jumping to guard. There are many variations that you can lock up. John Jones versus Lyoto Machida, right? You know, if you're going to go guillotine, maybe try it standing first from the front headlock. And this one more thing I want to mention is you kind of put him in like a shitty deadlift, like the form of a bad deadlift. See how that back is rounded? You know, like he's just not in a strong position to get up. It's exhausting and it's actually bad for his back. You know, you keep the weight on him and it's just hard for him to get up because mechanically not the most sound. Okay, mat return. Now, you know, this could be from the back, but I think just it could be from the front too with like double unders, and we'll talk about double unders a little later. Mostly from the back, just picking them up and dropping them down. You know, like usually what happens is you get into that turtle position, the guy stands up, you get your arms around his waist, and you got to pick him up and you got to bring him down. It could happen from the front too. You got to pick him up and bring him down. But it's really easy to learn in my opinion, and it's way less hard physically than it looks. Even with my bad hips, when they were real bad, I could still do this. You know, I could still boom down. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, mat returns are mighty. On a statistical basis, again, at mixed martial arts, at the elite level and anecdotally at all levels, by far the highest percentage way to get somebody's back is you take them down against the fence, and as they scramble up, boom, you're in on the back. And then you can drag them down or you can lift them up. I mean, there are dozens of high percentage ways to take somebody down from there. But the sinking your hips under theirs, lifting up, popping away explosively, and then driving them down is really easy to learn.
Yeah.
And as I said, if you take somebody down against the fence with a double leg, with a front head, and they escape and they get back to standing, if you do it right, you're going to be on their back, and that mat return is right there.
100%. And anyone that's looking at this picture thinking, oh, I'm not strong enough or powerful enough to do that, it's shockingly easy. I mean, don't count yourself out, because the mechanics of it they're really interesting, actually, how effective that it makes it.
Yeah, one of the big misconceptions going back to the earlier days of the sport, is that wrestling is hugely strength based, whereas jujitsu is hugely technique based.
Right.
And it's not true. I mean, wrestling is going to make you stronger than doing jujitsu, but they are both incredibly technique based. And
I
the
agree.
technique involved in
100%.
lifting somebody up is huge. And if you have good technique on a lift, you don't have to be super strong at all. You just have to have technique.
100%. So if you like jujitsu and you're seeing this move and you don't know if you can learn it, it is 100% a technique thing. And wrestling in general is the reasoning. It's just more exhausting, as I think it's just hard to get a man off his feet. There's so many submissions and so many ways you can finish a man with that in jujitsu. But when we're wrestling, it's just a harder task physically to take them down. So that's why I think it gets the rep of, I have to be stronger or whatever, but it's highly, highly technical.
Yeah, they folk style wrestling used to have a lot of what they called concession holds, but submission hold, same thing. It's just a different word for the same thing. A guy at Iowa or Iowa State, I forget which, he did his doctorate on the changes in wrestling rules from 1900 on. And they slowly took out all the submissions. And what was left was a martial art that you can do at 100%.
Yeah.
When you take all the submissions out, what's left, you can go 100%. You can't kickbox 100%. You sure can't do jujitsu at 100%. All your toys will be broken the first hour. But wrestling, you can go starting from the age of 5. You can go 100%. And so when you have a martial, it's a little bit hard for people to wrap their head around. But in folk style wrestling, by taking away the concession holds, the submission holds, it created a martial art that I think is the most important basis for mixed martial arts, even though it has no submissions, because by having no submissions, you can go all out. So start from the age of 5, you just go all out. You don't get any brain trauma like you would in boxing or kickboxing if you went all out. And that's why, as I said, I think wrestling is still the most important part of MMA.
I agree. 100%. Okay, so we kind of, I mentioned like the double underhooks on here, just general grips of the clinch, right? So, and here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game. John Danaher really had a good way he separated everything. When you're striking and you're not touching, you're in what's called this free movement phase. You're not being affected by the weight of your opponent. You can move freely. The clinch is different in that we're now dealing with each other's weights, right? Like I now have to deal with someone else's body and force. I cannot just move whatever I want freely. And really the name of the game is gripping, right? In jujitsu, it's positions like pin, like, mount, side control. You kind of launch things from there. But in here, it's grips. And one of the most common, even people that never fight, don't know how to do anything, they kind of end up here in this over-under position, right? He's got one underhook. You would not believe the difficulty I had trying to find a picture of it, just a basic over-underhook for some reason. So this isn't the best picture. But one guy's got an underhook, one guy's got an overhook. And then it's the mirror of that on the other side. The other person has the underhook, the other person has the overhook. And this is just one grip you got to know and focus on. What do you think?
Yeah, the over-under is the most important clinch. And unlike almost everything else in mixed martial arts, it is instinctive.
Yes.
When you throw a punch at somebody, they instinctively are going to close their eyes. And that's wrong. You have to learn how to keep your eyes open. If you tell somebody, put your hands up, they're going to put their fists under their chin and flare their elbows out, leaving their face and their body covered. Even when you tell somebody, put your hands up, they don't. They just open up everything. But an over-under, if you watch bears wrestle, There's all
Mhm.
these videos on YouTube of bears wrestling. If you watch lizards wrestle each other, they will go straight into an over under and try and take each other from down
Yeah,
there. So it's not just in our mammalian DNA, it's just in our living thing DNA.
100%. And I actually think it's good to kind of focus on those moves sometimes. Like what do humans, what do animals, what do creatures, what do they do naturally when fighting? Because a lot of the instincts, especially striking, are wrong, right? Like moving way too much to get out of the way of something. Head movement is a weird thing, right? Like you don't move your head, you like move your whole body. But this one is natural, and honestly, if you get good at what you're naturally gonna do, anyways, I think that's a pretty good place to go from. Now, from grips, you launch takedowns, you can launch like a few submissions, and you can launch strikes. I should mention that from all these positions, you should know how to like maybe take him down, strike him, the really those two things. Maybe how to disengage, right? And defend against whatever he's going to do. But these are like launching pads. This is like kind of like the stance, but it's going to switch all over the place. What do you think?
Yeah, the over under is the stance of in close fighting.
Right.
Obviously, you got head ties, double head ties, all kinds of variations of it, all kinds of things you want to try and drive into the fence. You want to take him down. You want to be able to knee him. You want to work elbows in. There's tons and tons of different things, but the over under is the basis of fighting on the inside while standing in mixed martial arts.
100%. Okay, the double under. So this is kind of considered the neutral version. This is like a neutral grip, right? But there are dominant and neutral grips. Like there are some grips I get that are way more advantageous for me than for him. And from this position, a big goal of yours should be to get two of those underhooks, right? You get two of those underhooks, you have tremendous control. Actually, why do you have control? Something to do with getting his center of gravity, like I know it's super great. It's one of the better grips you can have. Why is that? Why is that such a controlling grip?
Yeah, if you look at a sport like judo, grips is everything.
Yes.
It's really what all of judo comes down to is just getting the grip. Once you've got that grip, you off balance them a little bit, and at that point, whichever technique you use is like, yeah, whatever. There's a million
Sure.
different ways to do it. The off balancing, I mean, Jigoro Kano said Kazushi, off balancing is judo. So that's what
Yeah.
judo is. And in
Yes.
order to off balance somebody, you got to get your grips. The best grip with one arm on the human body is that underhook, but it leaves
Mhm.
you open to an underhook. And then you got the best grip on them. They've got the best grip on you. If you can get your head on the same side as the underhook, they can no longer get an underhook. Now you've got a huge advantage. And if you get double unders, now it's doubled. And if you connect your hands together,
Yeah.
now it is way harder to break as long as you're controlling the shoulders, as you see here, or the hips, which is the other common place. If you get
Yeah.
double unders and you just have your hands locked around the middle of their back, they're going to sag and escape pretty quick. But a double underhook, like you see here, is a massive advantage.
And like you said too, it can slide to different positions. I mean, like there's moves for when the hands are locked at their low back, at their mid back, up high, like you're seeing here. And I think when you look at it, I don't know a better grip you could get on somebody now that taking if you have two hands around their waist or two hands around their, up high, I don't think there's a better grip on the human body. Like you said, it's just so tight and just so perfectly big. Like a leg, you can't really get two arms around it like that. Human body, you can grab that thing. So double unders, man. Like if you're really good at double unders, like when you grab people with double unders, they go down. 99 out of 100 times, or just a high percentage. This is a big one. This is a very, very big one. Collar tie. So now the over under I know occurs in nature. What like it just happens. Collar tie maybe, I think it definitely is a very natural move. Maybe a little bit less natural than the over under, but equally important. And with this one, there's two. There's like a low version with the hips back, like you're seeing here. Actually, we'll get into the tie plum in a little bit, but you could be more upright with it, right? And basically, it's like the same mirroring idea as before. You see, one guy, the guy on the right here, has his hand on the back of his opponent's neck. His opponent has the same on the other side. And notice the control of the arm. The hand is kind of placed on the forearm and hanging down on the bicep, kind of putting weight on their bicep. And this is another super common grip, and it applies like earlier. It's kind of like a stance. It has throws you can do from it. There's strikes you can do from it. You should probably learn how to disengage and block his stuff. But this is the other important grip I would say you should know.
Yeah, it's massively important. Long before the internet, long before DVDs, long before television and radio, we had a president, Abraham Lincoln, and he
Yeah.
was the county champ at this kind of wrestling. They called
Please
it
no
collar
more.
and elbow. You actually started tied up, and then you would look for a takedown from here. So this is an aspect of fighting. You can actually see it on the frescoes from the tomb of Beni Hassan in Egypt. It's a position that goes back,
Wow.
who knows how long, thousands of years at least, because it is so intuitive. And the central purpose of that head tie is to pull somebody's head a little bit off of their hips. Once somebody's head's pulled off their hips and you have good positioning, they're in a little bit of trouble.
Yes, and that snap down is here. Right. If you want that snap down, you can get it from here. And if you want the numbers on your side, that's a number friendly move. So collar tie. And you know what? The uppercut is big from here. I mean, like when you have one collar tie going in for that uppercut, you can pull his head down into it. So probably of all the strikes, like we'll talk about knees a little later, but hand strikes, that uppercut is right there. Okay.
Yeah, Randy Couture, I consider to be the father of dirty boxing.
Yes.
And for those of you not familiar with the term, dirty boxing is just boxing out of a collar tie. That's all it is. And as I said,
Yeah.
to my knowledge, Couture pioneered it. He actually was a good amateur boxer. He
Right.
was really a world-class Greco guy. And Greco, again, for those who don't know, is a form of it's an international style of wrestling where there's no going for the legs. So your back's much more upright, much closer to what you would see in an MMA stance. And so Randy Couture just put those two things he already knew at a very high level together. And I think he is the father of dirty boxing. And it's gotten refined and refined and refined now. And it all begins with this collar tie.
Randy Couture is unbelievable, by the way. If like newer guys watching this, if you don't know Randy Couture, you got to go down a Wikipedia or Google search of Randy Couture. The man is a legend. Well, how old was he when he beat Tim Sylvia? It was over 40, right? He comes back, massively underweight. He's retired for a good amount of time, comes back and just whoops the monster that is Tim Sylvia. I mean, whoops him. Then fights Brock Lesnar. So you guys look up Randy Couture and tell me you're not inspired to start working a collar tie.
Yeah, there's about 15 rules in mixed martial arts, and one of them is never bet against Randy Couture.
100%, man. 100%. Okay, so tie plum. The I was talking about neutral and dominant grips. This is kind of like if you got two hands on the back of his neck, right? So just like getting two underhooks, if you got two hands on the back of his neck, this might be one of the most advantageous positions to really crack him in the head from the clinch, right? You can pull his head into your knee. Now, I don't think you can do that in the amateurs. So if this is your first fight, that doesn't mean the tie clinch isn't important. I mean, you could crush him to the body. There are tons of throws from there, especially now that foot sweeps are actually getting more popular. Before they were kind of like this mysterious technique I'm going to learn from judo that no one knows. Now they're pretty popular, and this is a fantastic position for foot sweeping. Really off balance them, block the leg, whatever you do. So learn this one. If nothing else, if only to defend against him getting it. Right? If you don't know the collar tie to tie clinch, you're really vulnerable to like a really dangerous grip. Go ahead.
Yeah. The problem with punches and kicks is there's so many joints. If you're not
Mm.
Pereira, whose joints are somehow mysteriously completely locked together, and he hits you with the hips, there's a little bit of leakage everywhere. If you hit someone with your foot, you hit somebody with your fist, but that knee is connected to the driving. All power comes from the hips. So all your power is going to come from your hip, and that big femur connecting to the knee means there's no leakage when you hit somebody with that knee. But knees are pretty slow. There's a handful of circumstances when you can use a knee basically naked. Somebody's staggered, somebody's
Yeah.
walking out at the very beginning of the fight. There's a few places, but ordinarily knees are slow, hands are fast, and so in order to make those knees work, you need that tie plum. You need that double collar tie. It is invaluable.
100%. I mean, knees are not only slow, they're kind of short. They're not very, they don't cover a lot of distance. I don't barely even cover as much as a punch. You can kind of hip in and extend the thing, but barely even cover as much as a punch. And like you said, they're very simple joints, a knee, right? All it does is this. It's just a hinge joint. You punch someone with your fist. Look at all. Can you even do people even know how many bones are in their hand? Same thing with your foot, right? But the knee is just so simple and so solid when you can crush things with it and not hurt yourself if you do it right. And if it's your first pro fight, then you get him in the tie plum and you knee him. I mean, you're gonna knock the spirit right out of his body, even if he doesn't go down. So yeah, tie plum, definitely a must. Final thoughts on tie plum?
Learn it.
Yeah. Okay, against the cage, right? You got to know over under, double unders. There's more grips you could learn, but those are the focus points. Thing is to know, like, this is a sport where things happen against the cage. Those grips are still happening against the cage, right? And now it's a little different in the space when there's no cage. A neutral grip is a neutral grip. We both have the advantage. We both have no advantage. I'm sorry. But if I have double unders and I have you again, over unders and I have you against the cage, and we both have this position, technically I have the advantage, right? Because you're pressed up against the wall, even though we have a neutral grip. So for people, we're going to divide this into like offense and then defense. Like the person that's pressing against the cage, and then the person that's being pressed against the cage. For the person pressing against the cage, I mean, if you're a guy that likes to grind people out like Randy Couture, or maybe could be, but Randy Couture is really that archetypal grind them against the fence and then just break them down. This is an invaluable skill. Pinning someone against the cage is the longer you can pin them against the cage, the more you break them and the more things you can do. You kind of like press them, and it doesn't stop when you're on the ground either. It's a constant pressure against that cage, and this is really, I mean, if you play this style, this grinding style, this is huge for you. And if you don't play this grinding style, this is huge to be aware of and know how to counter. Go ahead.
Yeah, pinning against the cage is the great equalizer. Mixed martial arts has almost no moves that have never been seen before. It just took everything you had in every combat sport, every martial art, tested them against each other and thereby you find out what works. But
Yes.
fighting up against the cage is absolutely unique to mixed martial arts. And the beauty of it is the great equalizer. If somebody has better striking, once you push them up against the cage, their hips are immobilized. They can no longer use their hips to hit you. If your head gets too low, they can do a downward elbow, and that's about it. So it can defeat striking. It can defeat jujitsu, because once you get somebody down, you can't sweep somebody through the fence, and you're not going to sweep them the other way because they know they can't get swept one way, so they can drive in completely. A rear naked choke would work there, maybe the guillotine a little bit, but basically, you can't get your hips out to throw an arm bar, to throw a triangle. Basically, it shuts down jujitsu. And even if the person you're going against has way better wrestling than you, if you put your time in this specific area, which is wrestling against the cage, you can be a better wrestler than some. If you've been doing this for 2 or 3 years against the cage, you can fight somebody who's been wrestling in general for 20 years. And if they haven't put in the time against the cage, you can beat them even at wrestling. So the cage is the fence, the cage, the wall. It's the great equalizer. It'll allow you to overcome somebody who's got better jiu-jitsu, better striking, and better wrestling.
And I think just a good thing to know is, MMA is a mix of everything, and that's what kind of makes it beautiful. But it's also kind of become its own style in itself. A big part of that is knowing how to deal with the cage. If you're training for a fight and you're not training at least against a wall, right? Let alone inside of a cage, you're missing one of the things that really makes this like its own thing. Like that where you are in relationship to the cage is a gigantic part of the sport. It's actually part of the point system. Cage control. So learning how to use this and how to use it to your advantage. The cage, studying the cage is extremely important. Certain angles on the cage are better than others. So definitely pay attention. And if you like to grind, you got to learn how to pin them basically indefinitely. Striking against the cage, right? So you've got them pinned, and you've got to learn how to keep them pinned and still hit them. And it's going to be a little tricky because anytime you go to strike, at least a little bit of distance is made, and it's that space and the lack of space, you pressuring on the opponent and just being a wet blanket on them. That is one of the major things that keeps them there. So you're gonna have to learn how to like break that momentarily, and then come up with something, and then go right back. So like learning how to break the space and strike and get back to there. What do you think?
Yeah. Striking against the cage is a massive part of this sport. Everybody who's taken 2 lessons in jiu-jitsu realizes, oh, I can get mount on somebody and then I can punch them, and it's hard for them to punch me back. Striking on the cage is not that dominant, but it is real dominant. It's a way to get off shots, not get hit yourself, and you can use those shots to get to that locked hand double like we talked about earlier, and advance your position. So striking up against the cage, huge part of this sport. And as I said, if you do it right, you can use it to beat somebody who is a better wrestler, a better jiu-jitsu player, and a better striker. So it's the miracle part of this sport.
100%. And you know what? You can use a strike as a kazushi in itself. A good way to knock them off balance is punch them in the head. That'll knock them off balance. and then you can get in on something. So cage strikes. If you're a grinder, you also from a crowd perspective, this will make it more exciting. If you're a grinder and you just cage pressure, if you're looking to make a go at this, no one's going to want to deal with you if you're just a cage presser. Make it a little bit exciting. Not just is it more exciting, it's actually more functional as well. You can set up a lot of cool stuff with it.
Yeah, one of the misnomers is that mixed martial arts is a sport, and it's not. It's entertainment.
Yes.
Mixed martial arts at the elite levels is all run by private corporations that are in the business of putting butts in seats in front of the TV, seats in a live arena, and it's not like your 8th grade soccer team or your collegiate baseball team,
Right.
which are devoted to the purity of sport. If you get into mixed martial arts, you got to be entertaining. And if you just wall and stall, you're not entertaining. You can be the planet's best wall and
Yeah.
stall player, and nobody is going to want to put you on their card. But you add in some strikes, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot more exciting.
100%. And there's a big difference between like a wrestler and a wrestler that knows how to ground and pound and strike on the cage. I mean, like Khabib knew how to ground and pound with that when he got you down. You know that is a whole different beast, and that I think is the scariest type of fighter is if they can just grind the hell out of you, and it's not just smothering you, it's boom, boom, boom. This is a whole different kind of animal. My nightmare, actually. This is my nightmare. And then you got to know how to take them down off the cage, right? This is I mean, one really interesting thing is the double doesn't necessarily have to land. Like you don't have to get him down in the center of the cage. A lot of the times you can just back him up to the cage, right? So like he'll kind of sprawl and you just keep driving forward, and he's on the cage. The cage makes it easier, in my opinion. He cannot sprawl back anymore. You know, so if you mess up a double leg, you really should know how to drive him to the cage and how to get it from there. Also, if you're really not looking to get taken down, you should know where you are in relationship to the cage whenever someone's going for your legs, because you know, you if you don't know cage stuff, you'll think you blocked a takedown, but now your back's on the cage and you don't even know how you got here. You know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the cage takedown is the piece that sort of puts it all together.
Mhm.
It's vanishingly rare that somebody gets finished when they're pushed up against the cage. Sometimes an
And here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game.
elbow behind the ear for the defending player will end it, but in and of itself, it'll tire the opponent out. It'll shut down huge parts of their game. But to get to a place where you win the fight, the vital chain there is the takedown against the cage.
Yeah, and that's where you really break them is when you get them on the ground. You know, that's where you really crush a man's soul is not necessarily pushing him against the fence when you're standing. It's when he's down and you're on top. That's the real grinding him out. Okay, just for the defensive person, you got to know how to stop the cage takedown. You have to. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to cover this one too much in detail, but it's really about see that leg split there. If you guys are looking at, you see how he's kind of turned his body and he's trying to fight for the underhook, and he's got a whizzer. Obviously, this is against Khabib and this is Barboza, so he's not going to defend a takedown. But this is like the position that you got to learn. It's that wide leg underhook. Use your grips to fight him off. You got to know this. If you're a striker, if you're kind of moving around, a more movement based fighter, this is a great way to stop takedowns. And if you really get good at it, you can tire him out from his constant attempts at the takedown. Go ahead.
Yeah, the same way there's a starting stance when you're separated from each other, elbows in, chin down, blah blah blah. There is a defending stance when you're up against the cage. It goes by a lot of different names. I call it a running man stance, but you want to be perpendicular to the cage with your feet pointing parallel to the cage. You want to have your feet as wide apart and your hips low so they can't connect their hands together. The overhook that you see there by Barboza's left hand is almost always there. You're looking to get an underhook or at least arm control there, and you want to keep your body as pinned up, as tight to that fence as you can so they can't get their hands around it. When I say tight, I mean in Barboza's picture, from his right ankle to his right knee to his right hip, up to his right shoulder, everything wants to be pinned up tight against that cage. And if you get that running man stance, you are in a pretty good place to start working on turning things around.
100%. And this is just another case for learning cage stuff, learning the MMA specific stuff that comes with the cage. Okay, we're going to talk about the ground now. we got a picture of Derek Lewis standing up. And this has kind of been like the joke in jiu-jitsu. Hey, just stand up. You know, like whenever I was rolling with Charles, for those of you who don't know, Charles is a monster and I could not possibly stand up. The joke is, hey, just try standing up. You got to know how to stand up. We're gonna start with just the bottom guy. You got to know how to stand up, and you should. I mean, ideally, you could stand up from any of these positions that we're about to go over. We're about to go over all the ground positions, and for the top guy, you got to know how to prevent him from standing up. You know, if this is kind of, it's not necessarily an MMA specific thing. People in jiu-jitsu do want to stand up sometimes, but if your game is situated in a way where you're not really dealing with people trying to stand up from bottom side or trying to stand up from guard, or you know, you're not going to be able to keep them down. You're not going to understand what to do there. So what do you think about standing up?
Yeah, I think very often people get overly fixated on rolling from the knees and they don't understand it's a tool to increase your groundability,
Hmm.
but it's not a fight in and of itself, and it can delude people a little bit. I mean, push-ups are great. Push-ups will make you a better fighter, but you're not going to start doing push-ups in the middle of a fight.
Right.
And when you're using this tool of rolling to increase your groundability, I think people that the tail starts to wag the dog sometime, and people think it's the whole fight. And
They do.
so yeah, if you get somebody, if you develop your stand-up ability, you can shut down an awful lot of jujitsu. And I am so glad you have Derek Lewis here because he has
Yeah.
my favorite stand-ups in the sport. He gets a little tired. He goes, okay, I'm gonna lay here, and you hit him in the head a couple times, and he's breathing, and he's like, okay, all right, I feel better now, and he just sits up and moves up. It's just a wonder to behold. Cracks me up every time I see it. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing. I know it works for him. But I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. But I would recommend appreciating Derek Lewis for the genius ability he has to just stand up.
Yeah, you know what? He'd be a good one to do a breakdown on. Like, how is Derek Lewis just standing up? All right, so ground and pound. I just want to talk about ground and pound real quick. This is another thing that kind of makes the sport different from any other style. There's not really a combat sport. I mean, Sambo, I think Sambo does do it, but holding someone down and punching them and getting punched while you're being held down, this kind of changes everything. People may not realize this. Sometimes your head hits the ground twice. Well, it gets hit twice, right? You get punched in the head and then your head hits the ground. And it's kind of like the brain's gonna rattle twice with that. You have to really understand ground and pound as its own thing. You know, one of the things is, you know, if you do a lot of jujitsu, you may omit this position right here where he's standing up over the other person. You can smash people from that standing position. I just did a camp where we worked a lot of that. You know, and you really need to look at ground and pound as its own thing because mixed martial arts is its own style, right? And that's from the bottom and the top guy. Really, really invest in learning ground and pound. There's a lot of techniques. You know, there's a lot of things. We're not going to go over all of them here. But what are your thoughts on ground and pound? How should someone look at ground and pound and getting and understanding it?
First thought, and it should be everybody's first thought, is kudos to Mark Coleman. The Hammer
Mhm.
is the godfather of ground and pound. As most fight fans know, he recently he was at his parents' house and there was a house fire. He got himself out, and then he went into a burning house, got both of his parents out, was in the ICU, could not breathe on his own. He's recovered now. He gave away the BMF belt at UFC
Yeah,
300 with his daughters in attendance.
yeah,
So yeah, first thing, huge shout out to Mark the Hammer Coleman, who is the godfather of this. He was the first person to popularize it, first person to use it with incredible effect. And it works even better under Vale Tudo, under anything goes rules, because you can use your head.
Mhm.
So some aspects of mixed martial arts, people are like, yeah, but on the street, there's dirty needles on the street, and there's all these bogus excuses. But if there's no rules, ground and pound, it only works even better, and it works phenomenally with the fists and the elbows.
Oh yeah. And this is one of the reasons wrestling is so good. It's because it puts you in position to ground and pound him. You can choke and submit him there, but the guy on top is just in a better position to ground and pound than the guy on bottom. The physics are on his side. And that's a good rule for the people at home to remember. Is like you want to be on top because that's where the best ground and pound option is. Like there are things you can do from bottom, but the top is where the best ground and pound is going to happen. And it's not a neutral exchange of strikes anymore, like it was on the feet. Right now, one of us has a very significant advantage over the other. And you know what? I remember watching the UFC where I saw Mark Coleman. It almost sounds ridiculous now, but I didn't know he was going to win. Like you look at it now and you're like, oh yeah, Mark Coleman was definitely going to win that tournament, but I didn't know, and I think that I think that shows how much MMA has kind of evolved our knowledge of what works over the years. Is now it's obvious Mark Coleman is going to win if you look at the past 300 UFCs. Okay, now we're talking about bottom positions, right? Or just positions on the ground, I should say, not just bottom, but positions on the ground. They're kind of like the stance, in that these are positions where you launch things from. These are like more like the grips, I would say. These are positions where you're gonna launch things from. You can return to these positions. You can switch between them. Some of them are more advantageous than others. You want to get the dominant ones. And full guard is one that just keeps popping up. If you look at even like the original UFC's, Royce Gracie, actually, I don't know if he went full guard in the original UFC, but we'll skip that for now. But this happens all the time. And it's like the bottom position in which you kind of take a break and decide what you're going to do next. You don't really stay here. This is not the position to just hang out too long from because you want to be on top. But you got to know it because it's going to help you minimize damage while you kind of collect yourself and do what you're going to do next. What is your thoughts on full guard over the years?
It sounds a little absurd to say, but the key thing you have to do in order to win is to not lose first.
Yeah.
If you get knocked out, if you get ground and pounded, if you get submitted, you're never going to win. And closed guard, full guard is a supreme defensive position from bottom. Um, it's not going to last forever. You have to open those feet and go on the offensive for before too long. But as you said, it buys you time. It is a phenomenal defensive position. If you can control that head, you can pull them down. Once you get them from there, you've got a lot of options. You can wait for the referee to stand you up. You can try and get their back. You can stand up. You can submit them. You can strike them. There's tons of different things you can do from there. So people sometimes look down on like, well, that's just a defensive position. But yes and no. I mean, defensive positions sometimes are very necessary because if you lose, you can never go on the offense. And it is a tremendous platform to open up those feet and start going on the offense.
I think there's the most submissions available to the bottom guy from here too. In MMA, like half guard, there's not a lot of finishing options. There's really almost none from mount or side control. This is a position that does offer you finishes from the bottom. We'll talk about the triangle choke and the armbar in a little bit, but you can finish from here, and that is one thing that kind of makes it unique. Is the ability to do that from your back. Half guard, nowhere near as good in MMA as jiu-jitsu. I would say. Irene Couture again, loved being in people's half guards. Like you don't have, like, once you have them pinned, right? Like if you're on top half, this is in jiu-jitsu, you don't have to pass. You can hang out there and you can land a lot of great strikes, especially if you've got them against the cage. So person on bottom really should know how to not be there. Maybe learn how to transition back to full guard Or I would say a better option might even be Z guard, because Z guard it's just easier to stand up from. But what are your thoughts on the half guard in MMA specifically?
Yeah, one of the biggest differences between, maybe the biggest difference between
Mm,
jiu-jitsu competition and MMA is the half guard. Statistically, in gi competitions, particularly, bottom half guard is the highest percentage way to score points. It's
yeah.
why you get so much butt scooting. People want to get that half guard, get on their side, get an underhook. It's the highest percentage way to get points. But in MMA, guys will actually purposefully go from full side control into half guard because you can use that leg to hold the person and then rain down elbows and rain down hell fists and win the fight. Yeah. So knowing that, knowing the pluses and the minuses of the half guard is massive for MMA.
Yes. This is the big thing that would, if you were a jujitsu guy and you didn't know this, this would come as a shock to you if you didn't know it and you stepped in there and you found yourself in this position. You will find it to be a completely different world than the one you're used to. Side control. I still think side control is a really good pin because it opens up that top crucifix there. Right. So side control, for anyone that doesn't know, our bodies are perpendicular. Right. We're making a right angle. She's facing this way and I'm making a right angle off of it. Um, it doesn't offer, I mean, you can really kind of hit some elbows, the elbow that's closest to the head, but it really becomes awesome. It really evolves if you can pin the arm down with your leg somehow. In this way, you get a lot of free shots off and a lot of finish. I mean, maybe not a lot, but there are definitely a good amount of finishes. Matt Hughes versus BJ Penn comes to mind, right? Like this position is actually a fight finishing position. Even though you're not knocking them out or hurting them, I mean, it hurts, don't get me wrong. It's not these massive ground and pound shots. If you keep them there for like 30 seconds, they're going to stop it. What do you think?
Yeah, side control is arguably the best position of all.
Hmm.
Definition of position, of course, is controlling the opponent's hips in such a way that they can't readily launch effective strikes or effective submissions. We used to believe that mount was the holy grail and the place you wanted to get to, the dreaded mount, as Rorion Gracie put it in the first Gracie
Four
in
point
action
move.
tape.
Yeah.
But yeah, 4 point move. But when you have mount, the opponent's hips are under you and they can buck you. Habib Nurmagomedov, kind of modified mount a little bit to squeeze with his legs, so it didn't matter so much if the hips were moving. But for most people, I think they side control is even more effective. And if you get that crucifix, it is very close to being game over.
Yeah. And a good thing to know is if you get side control, don't be necessarily in a rush to go mount. Right? If you took the person down and you passed the guard and you're now in side control, don't feel like you have to go to mount immediately. I've seen a lot of guys just give up great top position because of that. You can take a second to chill here. This is the position you could chill in the best, probably. You're on top, you've got them stapled. Don't be in a rush to lose it to go for something else. Take a breath and then decide what you want to do next. Then we have mount, right? In terms of control, definitely not as good as side control. But in terms of striking, it has a lot of advantages. You can posture up the highest while keeping control past the legs. What are your thoughts on the mount these days?
Yeah, mount is still a phenomenal position, and it's relatively easy to pop from mount to side control if you want to. So it's not like once you get mount, you have to stay with it. It's a fact that in the 80s, I used to train with a top 10 PKA kickboxer, really, really tough guy named Andy Long from Springfield. And he was, like I said, an international class kickboxer, PKA kickboxer, but he also had a black belt in Hapkido, which is a joint locking art from Korea. Some people say is based on Aikido. I don't know whether that's true or not. And I asked him, hey, how do those, uh, we have we have uh, a fair around here called the Big E. Lasts for about 10
Yeah.
days. And when he was a young man, a teenager, his goal was to go to the Big E and get in a fight every single day at the Big E. He was just a beast.
Just
And
one of
so I
those
knew he
guys.
tried out Aikido on the street before. And I'm like, hey, how does Aikido work in the street? And he said, it works okay, but it works best after you've hit him with a left hook. So you whack them with a left hook, grab their wrist and throw them around. Mount is a little bit like that.
Yeah.
If your opponent is completely fresh, it's going to be very, very hard to stay there. They're going to be bucking like crazy, shrimping like crazy, maybe only get 1 or 2 shots in. But if you whack them with a left hook and they fall down and you jump on top of them, they're still a little bit on Queer Street. It is one phenomenal position.
Oh yeah. And you know what, guys watching at home, if you get mount and there's 30 seconds left in the fight, try to hit him. You know, like if there's 30 seconds left and you're not going to be able to secure a sub, try to hit him because you can crack him from here. And odds are in the next round, he's still going to be feeling that. If you go for a submission, he's not going to be feeling that the next round. You know, the submission is all or nothing. If you hit him from here, you have such a good position to blast him. You will do damage, and the refs and the crowd will enjoy it. Okay, this position to me has really emerged as super important. This like referee's position in wrestling, for people that don't know, in the beginning of the second period, one guy can pick where they want to go. They can go neutral, which is where we're standing up. They can go top, which is where the top guy is that's about to punch him, or they can go bottom. When I was doing wrestling in high school, I was doing jujitsu as well. I thought this was a stupid position. I didn't get it. I was like, why would I start here? But I think this is just how a person stands up. You know, if someone's on top of you and you want to stand up, a lot of times you find yourself just kind of naturally going here. So this is one of those natural positions, like the overhook and underhook. Now, the reason I say this is because you should know what to do from here in both situations. You should really understand it as a position. The top guy should know how to keep him down and mat return and hit him. And the bottom guy has to know how to not let the hooks in. He has to know how to defend himself. He has to know how to get up. So referee's position, I'd say, is an extremely important one. And you should really understand it from the perspective of MMA. Because in wrestling, you're not even allowed to lock hands around there, but in MMA, you are. So there's differences. What do you think?
Yeah, in 15, 20 years ago, I was the commissioner of NAGA, the North American Grappling Association, and we noticed more and more people were winning from this position, and we weren't awarding any points for it. If somebody got mount, or if they got back mount, or if they got side control, they would get points. But when you would get to here, people were winning from it, but it just wasn't recognized. And it's actually, you can call it top turtle, you can call it referee's position, it doesn't matter. It's this position.
Yes.
And it's an incredibly effective place to be. As long as you're aware of the sweeps that are available on bottom, you can hang in here for a long time. There's a lot of submissions from there. There's a lot of strikes that are available for there. So yeah, knowing this position is incredibly important, and it's part of a larger movement of adding more wrestling to jiu-jitsu, adding more wrestling to mixed martial arts. Jiu-jitsu was codified by Carlson Sr. He's the guy that invented the rules for it. He recognized, of course, mount, back grab, knee on belly, and that structure is the dominant one to this day in a lot of people's minds, but it does not encompass everything that happens anymore. And you absolutely, positively have to include this and recognize this as a solid position of control.
Oh, 100%. And I think people at home, like, one of the reasons why he can't break you down with his hands, right? His hands are preoccupied with trying to push himself up. So like, unlike mount or bottom side, he can't actually grab you and hold you down and stop you from doing things. And what people also should know is if he starts to build up, if he gets his arms straight and starts to rise his level, and you punch him in the head or you go for a choke, his arms will bend naturally to either defend or block the strike. So like you could hit him as a form of a breakdown. You know, you hit him, he brings up this one hand, you drive him this way. You know, so it's just a great position to and it's very uncomfortable too for the bottom guy. So definitely pay a lot of attention to this one. Okay, now we're gonna get to a few submissions. Guillotine. I think I've seen so many guys in their first fight pull guillotine and squeeze as hard as they can, and it goes one of two ways. Either they like win and almost break the guy's neck, or two, they completely gas themselves out and land on their back, and now they're in big trouble. So guillotine, it's got to be one of those higher percentage, not percentages, but it's got to be in the top 10 finishes in mixed martial arts, I think. But I mean, you should know it's probably better on the way down than it is to just jump it. Like if you are getting double legged and you sink up a guillotine on the way down, that's probably a better time for guillotine than getting front headlock and jumping guard into guillotine. But I'd love to know your thoughts on guillotines. I know NESF, big guillotine school.
Yeah, guillotine is my, or guillotine, I never did know how to pronounce it. Is definitely my it's definitely my favorite submission. But it's not because I'm tall and skinny. Everybody can pull off guillotines. It for against an untrained opponent,
Yeah.
they're gonna a street fight, for lack of a better term. They're gonna swing at you with sloppy punches that could be hard if they're athletic and if they have good core strength, and then they're gonna try and grab you at some point. I've broken down about the use of martial arts in about 2,000 different street fights from videos, and it's a real common pattern: sloppy, and then some kind of a grabby tackle thing. And the guillotine is right there. It's also
Yeah.
right there, and it's various and sundry forms now: ninja choke, marcellatine, 10 finger, a lot of variations of it. But a guillotine is an absolutely, positively must know submission
Oh,
hold.
100%. I have a funny story about a guillotine. My Taekwondo teacher, who was like a blue belt at the time, came to my high school to do like a demonstration, and I was there. And there was this wrestler, you know, he would wrestle. We were in ninth grade, so we couldn't have done that much, but he was like a good wrestler in middle school or something. Of course, my Taekwondo teacher pairs us up to grapple in front of everyone because the kid was kind of mouthing off. And I knew, like, I was worried. I was like, crap. But I knew he was going to dive for my legs and leave his neck open because he didn't know what a guillotine was. So I jump guillotine, and we actually land so hard he breaks his shoulder. And everyone
Oh,
yeah, everyone thought I did a mysterious secret jujitsu move where I magically broke the guy's shoulder. But all I did was jump guillotine on the way down. Okay, triangle choke. Probably the highest percentage move off your back. Right, one arm in, one arm out. Probably the highest percentage finish from the guard is triangle choke. So if you're going to learn one off your back, probably triangle choke. What do you think?
yeah, triangle choke is phenomenal. Comes from judo, probably came from jujitsu before then. Little known fact, it was not used in jujitsu until Holmes Gracie saw it in a book in the 70s.
And here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game.
It's like, oh, this is pretty cool. And now, no question about it. It's just you. It's a huge part of jujitsu now. Not used in judo anywhere near as much as you can think. To the best of my knowledge, the first guy to win with it internationally is a guy named Kareth Brown, who runs IMAF now. Casual friend of mine, man, I've got an absolute world of respect for. He medaled in the, I think, gold medal in the LA Olympics in '84, and I believe he's the first person in judo to use it successfully at a high level international competition. But it is absolutely a staple now of jiu-jitsu on the ground, of jiu-jitsu in mixed martial arts. And it's also a great thing to know, because if you hit somebody, you can concuss them, and if it's on the ground, they can fall and hit their head in the curb and die. If you armbar somebody and they don't tap, you got to. It's like pulling the leg off of a turkey. You got to rip that arm out. It's kind of gross. We talked about the guillotine earlier. Rear naked choke, triangle choke. They're kind of nice. They're pretty chill.
Sure.
Aikido is an art. They pride themselves on being peaceful. If you really want to be peaceful in self-defense, learn jujitsu. Learn how to finish somebody without hurting them. I read an interview with Hoist Gracie recently, where he was asked, "How come your father and your brother, your older brother Horio, chose you?" And everybody had said the general knowledge was that he was chosen because he was little and skinny, unlike Hickson. But he said, "My father chose me because I'm very dutiful and I will do what my father tells me to do." And Elio wanted to prove that a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu expert, could fight anyone in the world, the biggest, scariest people they could find, with no gloves and no rules, and finish them without hurting them. And he said, my brothers, Hoyler, Hickson, man, if they got on top and they get a little upset, it was going to be face smashing time with an elbow. But
Right.
my father, Elio, knew that I would listen to him and I would be able to tap them out without hurting them at all. And you saw it, like against Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
Did that sleeve choke, finished him, didn't hurt him at all. Fought Dan Severn, finished him with a triangle. Boom, didn't hurt him at all. So big shout out to chokes in general, and absolutely the triangle choke specifically, for not only being devastatingly effective, but you don't even have to hurt the person.
100%. And you know what? It just represents jujitsu so well. Like when I think of jujitsu, I kind of think of the triangle choke. The triangle is the Gracie logo. If you look at what's going on here, you've got two legs and the hips versus basically like one arm and the neck, right? So you have your arms involved as well. You can pull down on the head, you can do all kinds of things with your arms. You have basically your entire body versus like the weakest part of his body. It's the arm is involved, but it's more versus the neck. The neck and the carotid arteries. And this to me just symbolizes jujitsu is the triangle choke. It is, like you said, man. This one is you can, and you know what? You triangle choke someone, if you put them out, they wake up like completely the same as they Okay, armbar, definitely less useful than the triangle choke. I used to think that they were equally effective. I now think that the triangle choke is much more effective from bottom. The thing about the armbar is you could use it from top or bottom, right? So you could be in mountain, you could go armbar, you could be a ninja stud like DJ and like mat return armbar on the way down. You can use it from the bottom. So I just think it's good because it's kind of everywhere. You can sneak one up. You can get one from that referee's position if you want to. So I'm going to say armbar is definitely one you should know. What do you think?
Yeah, armbar absolutely is a devastating position. Absolutely declines in effectiveness the better and better skill level that goes up. How many arm bars won fights in the UFC last year? I don't know, four
Yeah.
or something. From top, I don't know, a couple. But it at the same time, it is an indispensable part of your arsenal. And even if you don't use them yourselves, even though it's not really a part of the game, the type of fighter that you believe yourself to be, you have to know it in order to escape it. Offense and defense are just absolutely inextricably linked. And unless you've got some kind of special cables in your arms, you are not invulnerable to arm bars. So everybody should learn them, even if they learn them and know them well, even if they never plan to use one themselves.
Yeah, people are super vulnerable to arm bars if they don't know about arm bars. I mean,
Yep.
like, like you will get one picked off in like a second if you don't know what it is. UFC, there were early days, a lot of arm bars. Just because people didn't know what the fuck's an arm bar. Okay, this is the king, right? This has got to be the number one finishing move in any fight. The highest, like this is the most common reason for finishes. If you had to isolate it to one technique, right? Knockouts, you don't get to count. We're talking like which strike knocked the person out. No strike has knocked anyone out as close to as many people have been finished by rear naked chokes. This is the one. I mean, this is the king. What do you think?
Yeah, if you get utterly reductionist, you can reduce jujitsu to get behind them and choke them
I
out with a rear
100%
naked
agree.
choke. It is absolutely the most fabulous choke. People will they'll go to sleep in 5-10 seconds on the absolute outside. If the person you're fighting is twice as strong as you are and you hit him with a straight right, it might hurt your hand. If the person you're fighting is twice as strong as you and you have them in a rear naked choke, they're going to sleep.
Oh,
It is
100%.
the single great equalizer. It's the if people were to know only one submission, this is the one they should know.
Oh, 100%. It can be everywhere too. I put it in just a different examples. Most of the time, you see it with like the two hooks in from back control. But you could get it more upright too. Here we see Khabib get it against the fence. Anytime you're behind him, it's there. You don't necessarily need hooks. Get the choke, then figure out the hooks later, if that's there. One thing I think people really should take a look at is keeping them belly down and getting this rear naked choke. So breaking them down from the referee's position with two hooks in and getting it, which is very different from like this. Right. I think a lot of people will get the two hooks and then kind of roll off the top and then play the jujitsu version of it. But it kind of breaks my rule of staying on top. Right. If you're going to get bucked off of here and then end up here, that's one thing. This is still a great position to use. But if you got this, don't roll off the top. Like try to finish that rear naked choke from here because you can blast them with shots if it doesn't work. But yeah, what do you think about that? Oh, and standing too. Standing up, you can get it against the cage. It's just everywhere. What are closing thoughts on positions and rear naked choke in general?
Yeah, if you're interested in martial arts, if you're interested in self-defense, if you're interested in mixed martial arts, if you're interested in the peaceful resolution of someone attacking you, rendering somebody unable to hurt you without hurting them, learn a rear naked
Yeah.
choke.
Yes, easy to learn, basically pretty instinctual. I mean, like you're supposed to get the hand behind the head and everything, but we've got just a basic sleeper hold here, right? With Nate Diaz, like that. Once you get it and it's locked in, a 7-year-old could put away a fully grown man if they know how to do it. So rear naked choke, definitely essential. This was just kind of from earlier, just talking about the positions. I like to make sure we separate back mount from like back control, right? I talked about this already, but if you get this position, this to me is the number one. If you get here, two hooks in, guys flattened out, if this was the freaking jungle, you hit him in the back of the neck, he's never going to move from the neck down again. So this position, not only do you have the rear naked choke available, you can go off like Donkey Kong on it. This is like if you had two hooks in and he bucked you off and you kept his back with the hooks. So know the difference between this and this. They're two different things. And I think one is better than the other, even though they are both good. All right, we're going to close up with strikes now. We've covered all the grappling and the clinch stuff because I think if you don't know that, you're most likely to lose. Right? So we've covered the wrestling, we've covered the clinch stuff and the ground stuff. Now let's talk about how to hit them. There's just maybe a couple strikes we're going to take a look at here. But in terms of punches, the jab. When you first start fighting, you're in that free movement phase I talked about earlier. We're not dealing with each other's weight. The thing that makes the jab good, especially it's your first fight, right? It's a little weird. Like, oh my God, there's this distance between us and I gotta close it. It's close because it has the lead hand going, right? So it's closer than the rear hand, and it's straight, so it's taking the quickest path. If you just want to touch him at the beginning of a fight, if you just want to put, like I got to hit him, let me try something, the jab is a good one. It just has good logic on its side. And I could go on and on about the jab, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about the jab.
Yeah, the jab is so important in boxing that it's kind of everything. I remember reading in the 70s, reading an interview with Muhammad Ali, and they're like, "How did you like the Rocky movie?" And he said it was a little bit unrealistic because the Rocky's coach kept telling him to jab, 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 rock, jab, and he goes, "You don't have to tell a boxer to jab. That is boxing. Like they're gonna be jabbing." And it is like for boxing, it is boxing. It is less important in MMA, but it is still of vital importance. In boxing, it's often used primarily, well, it's used for distance, used for a lot of things, used for distance management, used to tell what kind of reactions people are going to get. But you don't see a lot of knockouts from it. You don't see a lot of fight ending from it. But in MMA, with a 4-ounce gloves, with people moving in on you from a farther distance away where you can time them, it's almost like a straight with your front hand. I mean,
You
it
can
can be
knock them out.
absolutely devastating and does not need to be, it does not need to set up something more powerful. You can really, really hurt somebody with a jab, which we actually saw on Saturday night. A lot of fights were just won with that jab, landing on the face and cutting it up. So yeah, jab absolutely
Yeah.
must have part of this game.
I think the most important thing too is it's different than boxing. You try to give the guy a concussion with that jab. Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns comes to mind, right? Like just knocking him senseless with that jab. Okay, cross. A lot of people call it a straight right. I just kind of learned it as the cross first, so I always call it that. But I believe it gets its name from it's pretty easy to cross over the guy's shoulder. You can kind of see here there's like an X made with Gaethje's fist and Oliveira's fist. But really, it's huge. It's like one of the most important punches. It flies straight, which it's gonna get there the quickest. It's hard to see coming because that human eye just has a trouble seeing things that are truly straight coming at it. And you've got the jab doesn't get a lot of rotational power from the hip. I mean, you can do versions of the jab where have a lot of rotation. This one's got a lot of rotation of that back hip onto it. So it's really powerful. It's really straight, and it's just kind of hard to see coming because of just the way it is. What do you think about the cross or straight, whatever you call it?
The cross, the straight, whatever you want to call it, it is the single most important anything in mixed martial arts. It is by far the most common fight ender. It isn't a lot of times, maybe a majority of times, when you see a finish via rear naked choke or a finish by an arm choke, they got dropped first with that straight
Yes.
hand.
Yes.
It is the most significant bout outcome effector in mixed martial arts. There's obviously a lot behind it, so you can't just isolate that one single move. But it is the most important move in the sport.
If you were to focus on one punch, this would probably be it, right? I mean, like if you just had a piston of a right hand or left, whatever it is, this is that move. So the cross. Lead hook, not nearly as fundamental as the jab and the cross, in my opinion. A little bit more tricky to learn, but super high percentage of knockouts when it's done right. Mike Tyson, a lot of left hook knockouts. GSP knocked out Mike Bisping with a left hook knockout. The Carlos Condit, Dan Hardy thing, where they're throwing left, like both throwing a left hook and one of them hit and got a knockout. Once you get the mechanics of this down, it is a really good punch, and it actually sets up the way it loads up your hips. The double leg just kind of flows off of it. I remember reading in BJ Penn's book, he was big on left hook to the double leg. So if just to set up the double leg alone, the left hook, lead hook, definitely worth learning. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the hook off the lead side is incredibly important. If you hit somebody straight on, it's very hard to knock them out. Tyson did it on Larry Holmes, hit him straight on the forehead, knocked him out. But that's Mike Tyson. Whoever's listening to this is not Mike Tyson. Mike, if you are listening, hi, buddy, big fan right here. But you're not Mike Tyson. In order to stop somebody with a punch, you typically need to look in their ear and strike across their shoulders.
Yeah.
That's what the left hook does. And typically, that's what you see the cross right there. That's a devastating because it's going down the shoulders.
Right.
Oliveira can look in, sorry, Oliveira, you can look in that ear, punch straight across the shoulders. That's a knockout shot right there, or potentially a knockout shot. Left hook is the same way. And in addition, the hook is very, very hard to see coming. And the worst shots are always the ones that come out of nowhere. If you see it coming, you tense up a little bit. You know how to roll a little bit. You can survive a lot. But if you don't see it coming and the hook comes outside of your vision, it can be absolutely devastating.
100%. It comes outside. It comes outside of your from your peripheral, you know, and you know, you fake them a little bit. You fake a double leg, bam, left hook. His hands are down. It's definitely worth learning. And then I don't think you shouldn't know the rear hook. You know, you can kind of combine them together, but this one you're usually going to use more if you're up against the cage. You know, if you're pressing the guy against the cage and you need a shot, a rear hook is a very good one. Just because it's you know, the arm is bent and it's with the rear hand, so it's kind of far away from the opponent, right? Making it kind of hard to land. But I see guys extend their arm and just wing this thing sometimes. Just boom. So knowing how to throw that rear hand in that circular motion, whether it's from close or you're just going to put a ton of power behind it, I definitely think is worth learning in this sport. What do you think?
Yeah, people often get a mistaken view of a rear hook because of boxing. Typically, nobody's going to throw a rear, very, very vanishingly rarely would somebody throw a rear hook because it leaves you so open to the jab. But there's so many more variables in mixed martial arts: clinching, takedowns, elbows, punches, kicks. That the all, as I said earlier, boxing is a jab. The jab dictates everything that happens in boxing. That's not the case in MMA. So there is a huge place for hook off that rear side in our sport.
100%. Okay, rear uppercut. Got to know it. One of the basic fundamental punches, right? Like you got to know basically straights, the circle, the hooks, and then the uppercut. The thing that makes this so important in this sport is, you know, doing it in the clinch, doing it against the cage, and you can use it in the open too. But it has so many uses within like the specific style of MMA that I think you should learn it as a move on its own first, if you're going to use it in the clinch against the cage and all that. It's just good to know the mechanics of how to throw an uppercut with that backhand. Very hard to see coming. Very dangerous because it's hitting underneath the chin. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, people in MMA, particularly when they start out, they know 1 and 2, and they know it to the head. And they go to the well too often with it, and they discover if all you have is shots coming straight into the head and to the head only, it's pretty hard to land them. People are going to be level changing quick. They're going to keep their hands up. It's hard to land. So even if 1 and 2 are your bread and butter, you still have to know the hooks. You still have to know the uppercut in order to be able to set those up. If they're all you've got, it's going to be pretty easy to defend against. But so you have to know an uppercut and a hook and the hooks just for that reason. But set it aside. It is a great strike in and of itself. And it's a
100%.
particularly great strike in mixed martial arts because it makes people afraid to level change and get in on your hips. If that uppercut is coming flying up
Yeah.
the middle,
If
it's a
anything, for the takedown.
lot tougher for them to level change on you. Unlike the other punches, straight punches, a hook off the lead side, hook off the rear side, those are all just invitations to level hook and get in the hip. So rear uppercut, absolutely an indispensable part of your arsenal.
Yeah, you want to be able to constantly change the path your punches are taking, right? You don't want to always come with circular stuff. You don't always come with straight stuff. You don't want to always come with this vertical stuff. You want to mix that up. Keep him guessing as to which path these strikes are going to be taking, and you'll move his guard around. And I'd say the least important punch out of all this is the lead uppercut. Of the six I've just given you. Not that it's not important. I just think you should understand the mechanics of these basic punches on both sides, right? There are some cases of lead uppercuts doing some big damage. Conor McGregor had a pretty interesting lead uppercut. He would kind of skip into it and get off to the side. But this, I would say, you should know. It could be useful in a clinch situation. You could like pop the shoulder and jam that uppercut up there. You may have your rear hand in the collar tie on the back of the neck, in which case a lead uppercut would be there. But I would learn it because I think you should learn the fundamentals on either side, even though I think this move is going to pop up the least. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, agreed wholly. There's people in mixed martial arts, I think, are a little bit too judgmental. They love a fighter until he loses one fight,
Oh
and then
yeah,
they think that fighter sucks. People often, I think, have a similar attitude towards techniques in mixed martial arts. It's a little bit closed-minded. By no means does everybody hold this. I'm talking more
no.
about people that don't understand the mixed martial arts deeply. Lead uppercut, as you said quite correctly, it's not the most high percentage strike you're going to have, but at the same time, yeah, you absolutely want to have it in your arsenal. And if you don't, people are going to be landing it on you because if you don't know how to execute something, you sure don't know how to defend against it.
100.
So absolutely, positively learn that lead uppercut.
Okay, the overhand. This is I think it might be the strongest punch you can throw without spinning. A spinning back fist might be as powerful, if not more powerful, because it's harnessing the power of that spin. But this is kind of like throwing a baseball, right? Like this is just like throwing a baseball at a guy's chin. It's a little different. It's kind of hard to practice on a bag or a in the air because it can kind of put your shoulder in some weird positions. But dude, wrestlers with overhands are like one of the most common builds. You know what I mean? It's really dangerous because it's happening here. It's going over the guy's shoulder, right? It can go over the shoulder, and it's great if you're shorter than the other guy. If you're shorter than your opponent, this is like the move for you. So what do you think about Chuck Liddell comes to mind too? If you're looking for a guy that really made this popular, I think Chuck Liddell is a good one to study. But what are your thoughts?
Shout out to Dan Henderson.
Yeah, man.
He's the Oppenheimer of mixed martial arts. He's the father of the H bomb.
Yeah.
Probably the most exciting, striking moment in mixed martial arts history. I'm a huge Michael Bisping fan.
I wasn't at the
Every front
time.
to back, every highlight has somebody who had their low light. Dan Henderson was the master of it. And as you said, particularly for wrestlers who have intense, insane core strength, maybe
Yeah.
don't have perfect form on their one and their two and their three, the overhand right is just made for them. And when it lands, it can be devastating.
Yeah, and I think what you said it, you don't really need perfect form with this move either. It's kind of designed to maybe not be perfect. It's kind of an ugly type of deal. So definitely understand this. Kind of like throwing a baseball. Okay, this might be a little bit extra, but I put it in because it's so easy. Spinning back fist. possibly the most powerful punch, possibly the most powerful like arm strike you can generate because it's harnessing the power of that spin. And if you miss a roundhouse kick, like a lot of people miss and they miss too much. It's so easy to just swing your arm around and hope you hit them. You know, you miss a roundhouse, guys coming at you, just swing your arm around to get back, and you might even hit them on the way in. So because it's so easy, I've put it in here as this is the one spinning move you could learn. This is probably not the thing you should focus on the most out of everything we've talked about, but it's a good one and it's easy. What do you think?
Yeah, spinning back fists are awesome. The only caveat, the only warning I'd give people is the name is a little bit of a misnomer. You typically want to hit with the side of the hand. It's actually a spinning hammer fist. If you
Yeah.
hit with the back of the back of the hand actually kind of hurts to get hit with, and all the tissue down here is relatively soft. If you turn that hand sideways, right here is relatively solid. That bone sticking out is god awful, and the whole ridge of bone down there is awful. There have been multiple cases of people breaking this arm, which I think probably wouldn't happen if you did this. But yeah, that spinning back fist will take somebody's head clean
Oh,
off.
100%. And like, dude, this part of the hand, it has a little pad and everything. You know what I mean? Like, don't hit with this. I don't even know how many bones are in here. Hit with this little pad. It's made for it. Okay. Just talking about kicks, lead push kick. I don't see them a whole lot in amateur MMA. I don't even see them a whole lot in regular MMA. But
And here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game.
I think the rear push kick you're going to need to know. This is just an easy kick. It's kind of like kicking a door down. And the thing about this kick is it's so long. A lead push kick is like one of the longest kicks you could throw, maybe besides a side kick. And in amateur MMA, you can use it on the person's knee. So if anything, just to kind of kick this guy's knee. In the beginning of the fight, like the jab, you know, you're like feeling out the distance. You're kind of like trying to gauge where he is. This is a good one for that. So while it's not used a lot, I'd say theoretically it's very good and there's no reason you shouldn't use it. What do you think?
Yeah, the most effective thing in mixed martial arts that isn't immediately apparent is distance management. Somebody sees an elbow land, they're like, "Oh, an elbow landed. That was awesome." Or they see a choke and they see the mechanics of it. And they're like, "Oh, that's really good." It's much harder to see distance management at play, and if you're not trained, you don't really notice it at all. It just looks like two people moving around and poking at each other a little bit. But those push kicks are the single most effective way to manage distance. They're incredibly good for it. You have to know if you're tall, you have to know if you're short. It is not just a very valuable, but it is an invaluable part of your arsenal in distance management. And distance management, as I said, is probably the most important part of mixed martial arts that people can't immediately get.
And it takes years to master. I mean, it takes a long time to really get down distance management. And one of the best ways to, like, when you get in there, you've got to kind of find him in space. As soon as you touch him, you're just going to have a better idea of where he is. And your best bet to do that are the long weapons. And there's like almost none longer, maybe a sidekick, but this is so long, and with the lead leg, it's a great reason for that. Rear push kick, I think it's one of the easiest kicks to learn. You know, you tell them, okay, kick a door down. You know, and most of the time people generally understand that and they go for it. Can really crush someone to the body, can really do a lot with this push kick here. And because it's so fundamental, so easy to learn, you have to know it, or I think it's going to be used on you pretty dramatically. So rear push kick. What do you think?
Yeah, man. as you said, is the easiest kick to know. Push kick off the front leg typically won't hurt. Push kick off the rear
Yeah.
leg
Yeah.
can hurt. It's got a whole lot of momentum. It's got massive um ability to control that distance. Somebody can be 50% larger than you. Front leg push kick may not stop them moving in. Rear leg push kick absolutely is going to stop them moving in. Uh, Absolutely great part of your arsenal.
Yes. 100%. Okay, lead roundhouse kick, mainly for the leg kick, like the inside leg kick, or it could be depending on how their stance is. If you're both got the same leg forward, you're left and left, it'll kick to the inside. If you're opposites, it'll kick to the outside. And it's just another one that's long, and it's very good for range finding. I don't think for your first fight you necessarily have to be crushing lead leg high kicks to the head. But knowing this move, knowing just how to kick the inside leg with that lead leg, I think you should know how to do. It's very common. What do you think?
Yeah, I tell all first-time fighters, um, you're gonna get at first when you're like, I want to fight, and then I got to fight, and you're super happy, and you start getting into training, and you start thinking about it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I got to fight. And the
Yeah.
pressure starts to build and it builds and it builds, and you start getting diarrhea because you're so nervous all the time. Come the day of weigh-ins, when you're looking at the other guy and you're like, oh my God, he's got a six-pack. You're trying to think of ways to escape. You just want to get out of there. Don't want to be there anymore. Coach works you through that. Now it's fight day. You wake up, you're dying with nerves. You got your walkout. It's getting worse and worse and worse. By the time you step in and get announced, your heart rate is way over 100. I mean, you are nervous. You are feeling the pressure. Nothing has happened. You ready? You ready? Go. You start moving around. The moment you touch that other person,
Yes.
it's just normal. It returns to not this high pressure thing, but just something you're super used to. But in order to get to that state, in order to turn from that heightened state of anxiousness, you have to touch the other person. It's
Yeah.
human nature to want to touch them hard. I don't know how many, half of most fights get open with an overhand right or a right low kick because people are so eager to touch the other person that they want to throw a bomb. But it's not safe to do that. A right low kick, a right overhand out of a closed stance is not safe. What is safe is a jab, which we've been over, front leg push kick we've been over, and this lead low kick off the low kick off the lead side, typically in a closed stance to the inside of the thigh there. They are great ways to touch the other person. That foot to the inner thigh actually kind of hurts a little bit too.
Yeah, it does.
And touching the other person it's not just that it gets rid of your nerves. All of a sudden, your body knows exactly where they are. It's not somebody who's bobbing in and out. You know where they are at that moment. So you've touched them, huge relief, and now you actually know where they are. And now the fight is ready to start. So yeah, inside low kick with that lead side, penduluming in, penduluming out. Absolutely must have part of your arsenal.
Yeah. And people need to understand, you touch them with something like this, something kind of smaller. It's long, it's a long weapon, but it's a smaller hit. It's not like a big punch to the head. It's easier to hit him with that big punch to the head. Like once you hit him once, it's easier to hit him twice. Yeah, and with something different. So moves that let you touch them are extremely important. The king of kicks, right? Rear roundhouse kick, the most common kick in Muay Thai, MMA, everything. This is the king of kicks. You got to know this one. If you're going to learn one kick, it might be this one. If anything, to prevent death by leg kick, right? You know what I mean? You can throw this to the leg and cripple someone. You could throw this to the gut and not kill them, but double them over, cripple them. You could throw this to the head, and I'm not sure how people aren't dying, to be honest with you, with some of the hits that I've seen. But it comes from so many angles. There's so many variations. There's so many targets. This is the king of kicks right here, the rear leg roundhouse kick. Thoughts?
Yeah. If you don't have it, if all you have is your hands, If all you have is jiu-jitsu, you're in for a long and painful night.
Yes.
Absolutely must know. You know, if you had one shot at somebody, would it be a straight right or would it be a high kick behind their ear? I'm not sure. It might well. If you had one chance at teeing off on somebody, it might well be that high kick.
Oh yeah. And as a crowd pleaser too. If you want to make people remember the fight, if you kick him in the head with this, I mean, people are not going to forget that. Okay, just two knees real quick, then we're going to cover just a teeny bit of defense and we're good. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Spear knee. You know, I call it a spear knee. It's just like a knee straight up from the middle. You know, there's variations where you can kind of hip into it a little more and drive it a little bit straighter, but know how to basically, from the tie plum or from the clinch, bring that knee up and hit him in the tummy. You know, that is very important to know. You're amateur, you can't hit in the head, but a knee to the gut can be absolutely devastating. Thoughts?
Yeah. The particularly when you start off learning how to punch, you hit them with your knuckles. There's a little bit of dissipation of force through your hand. The wrist bends a little bit. The elbow bends a little bit. Your shoulder bends a little bit. Your torso gives way a little bit. And that punch, it does not nearly have the effect that it will later when you learn to solidify everything up. But when you knee somebody, if you're taught it properly, the power comes from the hip, it goes down that femur, goes to the kneecap and the shin area. Right off the bat, you are throwing a shot with complete devastation. It's going to go right into those ribs, right into the liver, right into that weak line down the middle of the body, and it's going to cause damage from day one.
Yes, sir. And then, you know, this probably isn't as important, but you should know how to throw it in a round, like a round path, especially from the clinch. You don't have to turn your leg as much as he is here, right? It could be just a little bit of turn, but you want to kind of drive like the side of your knee, like the inside of your knee, or if you can get this full turn, the top of your knee in from a circular path versus just a straight one. You know, we were mentioning punches changing up the path. This is a good reason for that. There's not a whole lot of knee techniques, right? There's probably the fewest of them of any, like, you know, kicks have more punches. There's more punches than knees. So knowing like two, a straight one and a circular one, I think is important. What do you think?
Yeah, and the good news is if you know how to do an outside middle kick with just a little bit of tweaking, you know how to do a round knee. Once you've developed that kick, the knee comes very, very easily off of it. If you learn one and two, learning how to throw a hook, an overhand, an uppercut, those are brand new things that you have to learn. You've got to learn all kinds of brand new things that learning one and two, which is, you know, jabbing a straight, which people typically start with, doesn't carry over so much to a lot of these other punches. But if you can do that middle kick, very little tweaking, you can do that round knee, and you've got a devastating attack.
100%. Okay, this one's a little bit extra credit. We don't have to cover it too much, but the lead side kick to the knee is legal for amateurs, and it's long. It might be the longest kick, and you could just cripple the guy's knee. I mean, you could just take him out. Is it used a lot? Not really. Not a whole lot of guys come to mind. I know Holly Holm used it. I know John Jones uses it a lot, but it was Bruce Lee's thing, right? The longest weapon you have versus the closest target, which is going to be his leg. Would you learn this for your first fight? Would you learn this one? It's a little weird because you kind of got to have a stance built for it, right? You should probably be a little bit more bladed than you typically would throwing like a push kick, like a lead push kick. And it typically requires, not always, but your dominant side forward, right? Like it's just better if you're a righty, you're probably going to be better with right side kicks. At least that's the way I am. I don't know if everyone's like that. What are your thoughts?
It's a very, very controversial technique. You see John Jones there throwing it on Rampage.
Yeah.
Rampage says to this day he still feels it. It
Yeah.
injured him permanently. It permanently impaired his ability to walk.
Mhm.
Rampage has publicly and repeatedly called for it to be banned. I don't agree with that. I mean, it's a hurting game.
Yep.
If you're trying to knee somebody in the head or slam them on the ground, like Rampage was most famous for, you're causing brain damage to them. I think that's a lot worse than joint damage. I think it's an absolutely legitimate technique in mixed martial arts. I think it's undertaught. I think it's underused. As I said, if you ask me what is the most devastating attack with your legs you can do, that's probably it. And for that reason, absolutely positively, I would have everybody learn it early and
Yeah.
often.
Because so few people use it, and it's really not that hard to learn. I mean, a sidekick to the body and the head is difficult. My Taekwondo teacher used to say, you can judge a person's Taekwondo by their sidekick, right? Like that's how tricky it is with like the body and the head. This isn't that bad. I mean, this isn't really that hard to do. Even if you do it kind of wrong, it'll still work sometimes, So sidekick to the leg, people just don't use it, so they're not ready for it. And it's very theoretically sound, right? It's gonna hurt that joint. It's long, it's gonna help you get the distance down. Lead leg sidekick. So I'm not gonna talk about every form of defense. Just know you need to have at least one defense to all the strikes we talked about earlier, right? You should be able to defend against the jab, the cross, the overhand kick, all that type of stuff. And there's different categories of ways you can do that. The first, probably, it's like the worst, but the most to know, because it's like the one that'll work when all the other defense fails, is blocking. And blocking is you basically take the shot on a different part of the body than the opponent intended. Right. So if they're going for the head, you made them hit your arms. The problem being you absorbed it still. Right. Like you didn't get out of the way. You didn't, redirect it. You absorbed it just in a different part than they were expecting. What are your thoughts on blocking in mixed martial arts?
Yeah, blocking is an invaluable part of being able to defend against strikes. You have to learn distance management. You have to learn how to clinch. There's a lot of different ways of dealing with strikes, but blocking, using your arms, using your legs, using your elbows, your hands, your forearms, your shins to defend against incoming strikes is absolutely invaluable. And I tell people it's actually more important than knowing how to strike. If somebody's athletic, they played a sport, they close up their fist, the fist lands on the face, it's going to hurt. It's going to have a big effect on somebody. The instinctive way that people block, which is to lean away from it, close their eyes, lift their chin, is all wrong. So you have to overcome, I don't know, a millennia of who knows how long all these wrong reactions to attacks have been built into us, but you have to learn solid blocking fairly early on in order to protect yourself, but also to overcome all those instinctive responses to strikes, which are typically wrong.
Right. I mean, as every way we're going to talk about defending strikes is not instinctual, except kind of backing up. That might be the only one that's instinctual. This one, you're not just going to get. That's why you got to train it. Parrying, this is redirecting the path of the shot, right? So he meant to throw straight. You kind of, Mayweather's using his shoulder to do it here, but you kind of redirect the line of attack away from yourself. And theoretically, it's a little better than blocking because you're not absorbing the impact. You're redirecting it. What are your thoughts on parrying?
Yeah, pairing again, invaluable. This picture's perfect. Floyd Mayweather Jr., greatest defensive boxer in my lifetime, and I'm pretty old. I think arguably the greatest defensive boxer ever. His technique that you see there is just perfect. It's against a taller fighter, so he's tilting away a little bit. That chin is not in his shoulder, it's not in his collarbone, it's tucked all the way down into that chest. This is just a fabulous example of the power of parrying.
100%. And I think, Floyd Mayweather is a good case. If you master defense, it's hard to beat you. It's just hard to beat you. Okay, head movement. This is probably like for punches and getting out of the way of strikes. This is probably theoretically the best, yet probably the hardest to pull off. And there's like two things with head movement. One is, can you dodge the shot? And two is, can you take advantage of that dodge, right? Like, can you make him miss and now make him pay? And they're kind of two separate things, right? You should know how to move your head, but ideally you should be moving your head in ways that leaves you able to hit him back. Because if you're just moving your head and he's still coming at, you're probably losing, right? But if you make him miss and then hit him, this is like kind of the ultimate in striking, right? Is like you kind of use his force against him. You make him miss, and as he's still extending, you hit him. What do you think? Head movement.
You have to know head movement. There is no way around it in this sport. Head movement is so important that during the entire round, unless you're real far apart for whatever reason, which it shouldn't be because it means you're not really fighting, your head never stops moving as long as you're standing. And when you're inside the pocket, when you're within.
And here it is. Want to learn the ins and outs of the sport of mixed martial arts? Sign up for Knights MMA Online, the only online dojo built at Harvard University. Engage with the interactive curriculum, submit video assessments, and level up your character just like a video game.
Reach of each other, movement time from, you can see his left hand by his chin. The movement time from Tyson or anybody who's trained from that spot to his opponent's chin is inside of human reaction time.
Yeah.
So you might see that, you probably will see the punch coming, but you have no time to react to it. The only way you can protect yourself when you're in that pocket is by keeping your head moving. I mean, we saw it with Max at UFC 300. He pointed his finger down. He said,
Yeah.
let's fight. Let's trade right here. Had he not moved his head the entire time at a crazy speed, he would have been knocked out. When you're in that pocket, which you have to get into to hit somebody. In order to get close enough to somebody to punch him with your hand, you're close enough for them to punch you back. When you're in that space, and you're going to be in that space almost by definition in this sport, you have to have head movement because it's the one thing that protects you in the pocket, short of grabbing somebody. And that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So we've gone over positioning, head ties, double collar tie, underhook, body lock. We've gone over all that. But when you're any farther away than you can actually grab them,
Yes.
got to have head.
And if you want to grab him, you should be moving your head to get in there. I mean, like it's hard to just run straight at him. There's a weird thing that comes with head movement. When you really master head movement, it's almost like you can read their mind. You like you see Anderson Silva do the Matrix where he's, hands behind the back, moving the head. If you really want to be a crowd pleaser, head movement is, I think it's probably the most beautiful thing in striking. Just to make them miss by moving your head is pretty incredible. And everyone should strive to master that in this sport. And then the final thing of the day, the final form of defense is just footwork. Like footwork is going to be a really good way to defend. You can move your feet in a way so that they miss and you have a dominant angle on them. And what I mean by dominant angle is, they're facing in such a way where they have to turn to hit you, but you can hit them. The footwork is going to put you there. It's very natural just to back up, right? Like if someone throws a big roundhouse kick at you, maybe don't block that. Maybe just back up. Footwork, very important. Closing thoughts on footwork in defense.
Yeah, it's everything. 90% of the defense in mixed martial arts is footwork.
Yes.
Is distance management, is using those feet to stay to where you're safe, is popping in to try and elicit a reaction, then pop out, see what that reaction is. Nice, simple way to start looking for tells, start looking for things that you can take advantage of. Like I said, if you only learned one single form of defense in mixed martial arts, absolutely positively, be on stance, keeping your hands up, okay? It would be footwork.
Yeah, and that's why I put this last for everything. I mean, footwork, it's really going to do everything, right? Like it's really going to, if you want to grab them, you need to use some kind of footwork to get there. If you want to defend yourself, if you want to attack, you got to move to them. So footwork is kind of, I mean, you can't just fight with your stance in one place. It's got to move, and footwork's the way you do that. And that is it. Those are the techniques that you should know if you're getting ready for your first fight. I know it's a lot, but to not know any of these leaves you real open. I mean, these are the fundamentals. Study up. Closing thoughts, Kirik?
Closing thoughts, yeah. In mixed martial arts, by definition, in a fight, people are going to find where you're weak and they're going to try and take you there and drown you in those deep waters. And if you are weak in any of these areas that we've gone over in a unfair fight, if you're way better, then you're just going to win. And if you're way worse, you're just going to lose. But in a fair fight, which amateur fights very often are in mixed martial arts, your opponent is going to try and find a hole in your game. And a hole in your game, so therefore, a hole in your game is just like a hole in the boat. Everything else can have great integrity, but if there's one hole there in a boat, it's as soon as the water finds out there's a hole, your boat's going to drown. And MMA is a little bit the same way. As soon as your opponent finds out that you've got a hole in your game, you're going to start drowning. So don't have any holes. Have all these basics down to the point where you can effortlessly execute them, where you can execute them unconsciously.
100%. You should not have to sit and try to remember this list and you can't remember it. You should just be able to list this off the top of your head. Right. And like you said, the hole in the boat, that hole's going to get exposed in a war. If you're in like a real big fight with a guy, like a real tough fight, your holes are going to get shown and he's going to figure them out. And a war is the worst place to figure out you have holes. You know? So Kirik, man, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, man. Awesome job. Awesome. Well, thank you, dude. I've taken up a lot of your time, but that was incredible. Thank you very
No, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be, no matter how many people it reaches, the people that do see that video are going to get a lot of benefit out of it. So thank you.
Absolutely, positively, my pleasure. I'm off to Slovenia tomorrow, but I'm back on Sunday, so I'm good for Tuesday.
All right, sounds good, man. Hey, enjoy your trip. What are you doing in Slovenia for?
Commentary for Brave Combat Federation 81.
Awesome, man. All right, so
Should be fun.
You have your bio on your website, right? I'm just going to kind of do a introduction. I want to make sure I get all the.
Bio's on the. Yeah, I'll send you a link to it.
Okay, great, man. Hey, enjoy your trip, man.
Thanks. See ya.
Later.